Today we've got a showdown between two of our favorite e-commerce platforms.
This will be a hard one for us because we love them both and we work with them both on a daily basis. We're talking about none other than Shopify and Webflow E-Commerce. So stay tuned and see how they fare. Hey, what's up, Fernando?
Hey Dave, how's it going?
It's all good, thanks. Hey everybody. Many of you may remember us from the Flux e-commerce workshop that we did together a while back. Many of you may also recognize me from the Essential e-commerce website Elements video. In case you haven't seen it, give it a watch. We're going to link to it in one of the top corners of the video right here.
Yeah, make sure to give it a watch. So today we're going to be doing a head-to-head comparison between Webflow Commerce and Shopify, and going through pros and cons and basically helping you figure out which one you should use on a next project.
Just for a bit of context, we're both Webflow developers. We're also Shopify partners. We live and breathe these platforms. We love them dearly. We have a lot of deep understanding and context about both platforms from a real world perspective and using them in client projects literally every day. So let me put you on the spot, Fernando. Okay, gun to your head. You got to pick one of these two platforms. You got 3 seconds to answer. What's your pick?
Oh, come on, that's not fair. Don't do that to me. I mean, we both know that it's going to be always, dependent on the needs of the project. So I'm just going to use that as an excuse to get out of that question. And maybe we should just get into the pros and cons list.
Let's do it. To start with, Shopify is the largest dedicated e-commerce platform out there. It's a brand that is ubiquitous across the market. It's known to people within the industry and within the e-commerce community and people who are outside of it, merchants that don't even know other e-commerce platforms.
Yeah, and obviously Webflow is a much smaller company in general, and the commerce side of it is even smaller within everything that they do. It's a niche within a niche almost. So there's really no comparison in terms of size.
Yeah. Shopify is also the fastest growing e-commerce platform, which means that it might be the best e-commerce platform to grow with as a partner and to align with as a freelancer.
Yeah, and Webflow is also growing very quickly, to be fair, but just in a relative sense, it's still, like I said, a pretty niche tool, especially when it comes to commerce. It's kind of in its infancy if we were to compare it with Shopify.
So like I had said before, so many merchants and prospective clients would already know about Shopify. And what we see from our experience is that clients end up asking for Shopify a lot of the time. That's a really strong place to start. And it's a really easy sale to make when you're trying to close a deal. If they're requesting a platform and you can say, yes, we can build on that platform.
Yeah, and then for Webflow, on the other hand, it's not as well known at all by clients, and usually requires either presenting or even convincing sometimes if you find that it's a good fit for a project.
Since Shopify is a largely template-oriented platform, there are many both free and paid templates available from really, really great theme designers and developers. The Shopify theme store is very highly curated, so it's just a really great place to start. And beyond the Shopify theme store, there's a huge market for Shopify themes outside of their officially curated selection. There are literally thousands of Shopify themes available out there.
So there are about as many e-commerce templates in the Webflow template store as there are themes in Shopify's for both free and paid templates. Although many of them may not be quite as battle tested as some themes on Shopify that have been around for a long time and used by a lot of merchants.
One thing I really like about Shopify is that it's pretty easy for merchants to get used to the platform and to the admin dashboard, to the UI in general. And it's kind of a good option for merchants that are not that tech savvy because they don't get scared off by the platform itself and not being sort of scared of not figuring out how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, in our experience, Webflow also has been rather easy for clients, but in comparison, it just, Shopify is much, much easier. Webflow is a little bit more intimidating sometimes and has a bit longer learning curve for the merchants.
I think one of the most significant benefits to using Shopify is that they have an absolutely giant third-party app marketplace. They've got tons and tons of great development companies out there that are releasing new apps all the time that really extend the capabilities and functionality of the native Shopify system for literally any use case that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and they're all native. Whereas in Webflow, although you can integrate a lot of tools as well, a far fewer are number one specialized for e-commerce, and number two native. We don't really have that same sort of seamless experience that you would find in Shopify. Some of them are no code in terms of Webflow integrations, but a lot of them require some custom code, and it's just not as seamless and not as easy.
So I had mentioned that Shopify is really easy for merchants to get used to in terms of the management dashboard. Their management experience is just really, really high level, great UX, managing the product catalog, managing orders on an ongoing basis, managing inventory, managing the site content is just a really, really joyful and pleasurable experience. It's easy to learn. It's nice to do on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, this is one where Webflow is actually, basically just as good as Shopify. It's also the editor is a really really nice experience in general, and super easy to use.
So this is something that Shopify has that Webflow doesn't, and that is
Yeah,
an official mobile app for merchants to manage their stores. And I can say this from experience because for those of you that weren't on the live Flux Intro to E-commerce workshop where we talked a lot about our backgrounds, I was a Shopify merchant for 9 years before selling my company, and I used the Shopify iOS app to fulfill orders and manage my store literally every day for years. It was a huge, huge benefit. It made managing the store much easier, especially on the go. And not having that is like a big piece missing from the merchant management experience in general.
yeah. Like Dave said, there isn't an official mobile app for managing Webflow commerce. There are kind of third party independent developer type of apps that we found on the iOS App Store, but it's not really the same. It's not going to be the same as having an official one, which is a big hassle for merchants, as he was explaining. So
Yeah. Shopify has a huge number of payment processing gateways. I think they've got a couple hundred different gateways from many of the different countries around the world. So it just gives merchants from a lot of different places options to accept payments in the formats that the people in their markets are used to paying in or are most likely to pay in.
yeah, exactly. And on the other hand, Webflow has a much smaller list of available payment methods, which actually makes it harder and sometimes impossible to implement depending on the region that the client is selling in, because that obviously you're going to have restrictions in terms of some countries accept or can work with a given payment gateway, some countries can't, and so on and so forth. So in that case, Shopify wins.
So I had mentioned that the third-party app store is one of Shopify's strongest benefits. One of their other strongest benefits is their checkout. They have a battle-tested, industry-leading checkout experience that is proven to have high conversion rates. And it's very, very difficult for other checkouts out there on the market to compete with their checkout.
Yeah, I mean, Webflow has a starter template for the checkout, so basically also something that has probably been tested pretty well, and which is why it's kind of what they suggest you to start with. But it's actually customizable, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time. It's good because you can kind of get exactly what design that you want, and it's not really the case in Shopify, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But on the other hand, it just leaves room for implementations that are not necessarily as efficient. And when it comes to checkout, it's like a very very important thing that you really want to make sure that you have it down in terms of conversions and best practices for UX.
Shopify natively has some really, really strong and flexible advanced shipping features, which makes life a lot easier for merchants that have more complex logistics use cases. And beyond that, there are a lot of great shipping related third party apps that extend the shipping features even further.
Yeah. And just like I was saying when I was talking about payment gateways, the same kind of holds true for the shipping options in terms of what Webflow Commerce offers. Because just as the payment, this is the kind of thing that can make it or break it if you're trying to sell, in a specific location. If you don't have that many options, then it's just not going to be possible to use that platform in some places. So in this case, also Webflow uh, loses.
Womp womp. So just like with the shipping features, Shopify also has very powerful native inventory management features, which supports multiple locations, transferring inventory from one location to another within the system. It has a companion POS system for physical retail stores to use for managing physical inventory in the retail stores, but also for taking payments at retail. And those working in an integrated, holistic way together in one system also is just a really huge benefit for companies, for merchants that have multiple locations or a combo of e-commerce and brick and mortar commerce and multiple physical retail locations. So it brings it all together in a really nice way. Plus, very much like with shipping features, there are tons of third-party inventory management apps that also help to push the capabilities even further.
Yeah, and I mean that's obviously a lot more scalable, right, out of the box because you're talking actually pretty deep integration between different sales channels, and here even not just online, but that with also the physical stores, like Dave said, that does not exist in Webflow. We have the kind of bare bones basic capabilities that you would need in terms of managing your inventory and like everything that you kind of need to run a store, but nothing much more, not much more than that. And so it's really not as rich in terms of features there.
So we've said a lot of really nice things about Shopify so far and compared them against the shortcomings of Webflow. But let's turn the tables a little bit. Let's talk about some of the biggest benefits of Webflow.
Yeah. So we can start with, I guess, the most obvious one and the strongest one, the reason why we all love Webflow so much, which is complete design freedom and flexibility, right? You can, within the limitations of the tool, build whatever you want to make it look the way that you want, and without having to code. So that's pretty freaking awesome.
And by contrast, when you're working in Shopify, you kind of have to make this choice between these overtly recognizable standardized theme templates or, as an alternative, really expensive, time consuming custom development work to make totally custom e-commerce websites.
Yeah, and like I said, in Webflow, that can be achieved truly using no code, which is a big advantage. The other thing that Webflow has that's really nice is that it has a customizable checkout experience. So we've alluded to that earlier a little bit, but it's one of those things where if you know what you're doing, then you can make it look and feel exactly the way that you want. Whereas in Shopify, Dave is going to explain. Sorry.
It's all
You can make
good.
it look exactly the way that you want.
It's true. So I had mentioned before that Shopify has this really proven, battle tested checkout. They keep it locked down, and they keep it locked down for a reason because it works and it's proven to work, and they've refined it and perfected it to a really, really high degree. Now, that isn't to say that many merchants don't want to be able to customize their checkout. But when it comes to Shopify, it's not a possibility. And the only time that you actually do have control over customizing the styling of the checkout or the experience in the checkout is if you're on Shopify Plus, which is the enterprise tier of the platform, which is far more expensive and only for much larger companies.
Yeah. And just going to add something.
Sure.
Even then, you can only actually customize styling the structure, there still are limitations in terms of what you can change in terms of structure, basically. Um, the other cool thing about Webflow Commerce is that you can end up with a very unique and differentiated result, with each and every website, uh, completely away from the logic of themes and templates, because you can actually build it from scratch on your own, however you imagine it to look like.
So true. It's pretty awesome. And on the other hand, on the other side of things, when you're working in Shopify, unless you're doing a fully custom build, then you run the risk of looking very similar to other Shopify stores. This is when the same as what I had mentioned earlier about having overtly recognizable standardized theme templates. You and I both know this. When you go on a website and it's a Shopify website, you don't need to check the source code. You can tell right away this is built on Shopify. Uh, the same thing is true on an even higher level when you go on sites that use the same templates as each other. They start to just, everything blends together. All the stores look the same. It's hard to differentiate between one merchant and another. And, the internet's a big place. There are a lot of merchants out there. Differentiating and being unique is a very important tool for an e-commerce merchant.
Okay, yeah, and talking about uniqueness and just differentiating factors, Webflow has also IX2 interactions, right? So basically, that allows you to create any animations that you have, that you have in mind, yourself, and kind of weave that into the e-commerce experience, which is extremely powerful if used well.
It really is, and so cool. Whereas with Shopify, you're kind of stuck with whatever interactions and animations come prefab with the theme template you've chosen. Otherwise, you have to hire a developer to do custom dev work, which is time consuming and expensive and not always an option.
Yeah. The other thing is there's not really a time limit for experimenting, learning, and building in Webflow prior to setting up a hosting plan. So you can set up a staging domain and sort of just, play with it as long as you like, and only start paying when you're ready to actually publish a site.
I think that's so important. That's such a good user experience design decision that Webflow made to give people the opportunity to kick the tires as much as they need to before they have to make a purchasing decision to pay for the platform, especially for a platform that is a little bit, it has maybe a little bit bigger, longer of a learning curve for a designer and developer to get used to. It leaves that opportunity open to experiment and to get used to the platform. And I know that was very helpful way back when I was first starting out with Webflow. And in contrast, Shopify gives you 14 days. Now, if you're starting out in Shopify today, that's not a lot of time to get used to the platform, even though it's a platform that you can learn very quickly. There's still a learning curve. There's still like a certain amount of getting used to for any platform. It doesn't matter which one you're talking about. So in those 14 days, you better figure it all out. And then you just got to start paying for whatever site you're working on.
Yeah, the other really cool thing about Webflow is that it has really powerful SEO flexibility and dynamic controls over basically every aspect of the website. So, all of the sort of HTML tags and descriptions, the URLs, how they get treated, the title of the pages, uh, basically anything, plus the way that you map it to the actual design, which is also really important in terms of flexibility.
Yeah, I remember the first time I learned how to use the purple pills in Webflow for dynamic control over these things. It
Yeah,
felt like magic to me. It was just so cool.
yeah,
Uh,
and also makes it easier, right?
it really does. Shopify also has solid SEO capabilities, but perhaps a little bit less granular control when it comes to SEO than in Webflow, depending on how your chosen theme template was built.
Which brings us to our next point, which actually is one where Webflow is a lot stronger than Shopify, and that's blogging capability. Basically, it's just totally, totally different. In Webflow, as I said, you can build basically any design that you think up, and also in terms of blogging specifically, you can sort of map data and kind of like place data within a design basically wherever you want, and there's not really that much limitation. And when it comes to tying all those pieces of data to your design.
Yeah, I feel like in Shopify, blogging is kind of an afterthought. Shopify really is an e-commerce platform, and they have a blog function just kind of because they have to have it, but it's not really a focus of theirs, and it's also not a strength. So I would say that blogging in Shopify is just a lot more limited in terms of functionality, and it's not a platform that's super geared towards high level blogging. It's not a platform you would choose if your prime business function is a blog and you want to also have e-commerce. Whereas Webflow, if you're a blog primarily, choosing Webflow is like a no-brainer. It's super powerful, it's super flexible, it's super robust, and then you also have the e-commerce functionality, which is not an afterthought. It's really nicely built out e-commerce functionality. So what do you say? Next, let's talk about pricing.
Yeah,
Super
sounds good.
important. It's going to be part of the decision of which tool you're going to end up using for any given case. So let's compare them head to head. To start, just for a bit of context, Shopify's been around a lot longer than Webflow e-commerce has. And when Webflow launched their e-commerce product, they more or less aligned their pricing tiers with those of Shopify in an effort to be as competitive as possible.
Right. So getting right into it, starting with Shopify, we can see that they're based here. And by the way, everything I'm going to talk about is, of course, as of this recording. So as of right now, these are the prices, and of course, they're subject to change in the future. But as of right now, they're at $29. And that's US dollars a month for the basic plan. And you can cancel at any time, so there's no commitment. And then it gets cheaper if you commit and pay for a full year upfront. So you get 10% off. Basically, it goes to 26 USD per month on average. And then in addition to this, they also have a few incentives for first year for US and Canada. So we can see here that if we change it to yearly, the first year makes you, for the first year, you can save 50%. And they say that it's the first year right here. And then the other thing that happens is they also have some incentives for other markets. So, for example, we can see here in Brazil, they're actually charging 14 US dollars a month for the basic plan. And that probably exists for other markets as well, just as a pricing parity type of measure.
And Webflow is almost competitive. They offer their base tier at the $29 price point also, but that's only if you commit to a full year upfront. And if you want to have the flexibility and no commitment, the ability to cancel anytime, you end up paying a premium, and that premium is $42 compared to the 29. So the same logic applies across all of the three tiers of Webflow e-commerce versus Shopify.
There are also a few other similarities and differences in terms of the pricing tiers, and we're going to run through a few of them right now so that you can have a look.
Both Webflow e-commerce and Shopify charge transaction fees over and above whatever payment processing fees merchants get charged through the payment gateways. In Shopify's case, they charge 2% for the basic tier, and then they charge 1% for the mid tier and 0.5% for the high tier, while Webflow charges 2% for the basic tier and they charge 0% for the mid and high tier. But considering that Shopify has their own proprietary payment processing gateway, it's called Shopify Payments, they try to incentivize all of their merchants to use their payment gateway instead of third-party ones by offering them 0% transaction fees over and above the payment processing fees. But I just want to mention that Shopify Payments is not available in all markets.
Another thing that's different is that Shopify allows for 2 staff members on the basic plan, 5 on the mid tier one, and then 15 on the higher tier one. Whereas Webflow allows for 3 on the basic one, 10 on the mid tier one, and 15 on the higher tier one.
One thing that Shopify is able to offer to its merchants that Webflow e-commerce doesn't offer out of the box is the ability to manage multiple locations. That's very valuable to merchants, and it helps with managing inventory across locations and logistics in general. So Shopify enables their merchants to manage up to 4 locations in the basic tier and up to 5 locations and 8 locations in the mid and upper tiers, respectively.
So another thing that Shopify offers, even from their most basic tier, is unbranded email receipts for the customers. And as you can see in Webflow Commerce's tiers, on the most basic one, you actually get Webflow references included in transaction email footers.
Just because of Shopify's size and the partnerships that they're able to have with some of the big shipping carriers, Shopify offers shipping discounts to their merchants through those partnerships. And they go from 77% to 88%, depending on which tier any given merchant is in. Those savings can represent a really big additional value to the merchant. I can say from experience that many months, most months, if you're doing enough shipping, those savings can actually outweigh the cost of the Shopify platform. So you end up with sort of like a net profit, or the platform ends up kind of paying for itself.
And to wrap up, another thing that Webflow offers is indefinite free trial prior to publishing with a hosting plan. So as we all know, we can use a staging domain to essentially try as much as we want to build with Webflow, to see how the store is looking and everything like that. And then that's one thing that Shopify only offers to those that are set up as partners, Shopify partners, if they create a client store as a development store. Otherwise, the free trial period on Shopify ends in 14 days.
So as you can see, the pricing between the two platforms, it's not that different between one and the other. It's probably not going to make a huge impact in your decision to choose one platform or the other platform. For the purposes of most people watching this video, the pricing difference, it's not going to play a huge role in your pick.
Cool. So now that we've looked at pricing, we want to say that before jumping into a client project for e-commerce, you should probably ask your clients a handful of questions that are going to help you qualify and sort of get more context about the project that you're getting into, so that you make sure you're actually choosing the right tool for the job.
So write these down. We'll bullet them out here on screen for you somewhere. We've got 4 operational questions and we've got 4 functional questions. So we'll start with the operational questions. We want to ask things like, what e-commerce sales model will you be using? What types of products and services will you be selling? How big or complex is your product catalog? And what countries do you intend to sell in?
Yeah, exactly. And then for functional questions, you can ask things like, what specific or special features are needed? What needs might be satisfied by third-party apps? What degree of design flexibility is required for this project? And then what's your degree of tech savvy? And then after you have the answer to these questions, you're going to be much better positioned to determine what's the best platform for the type of project that you're going to be working on.
So now let's talk about where each of these platforms is a good fit. Starting with Shopify. Shopify is really versatile. They've got a lot of different offerings for different levels, and they're good for a broad spectrum of store types. Everything from really tiny single product independent craft stores all the way up to large enterprise level multinational brands and multi-brand retailers.
Yeah, exactly. And then Webflow, on the other hand, it really shines when it comes to design focused, mono-brand stores, just stores with smaller catalogs, even digital products. It's just, it's a great option for when you have a brand that's really going to take advantage of custom design and use it as a differentiating factor.
We get this question all the time. Other freelancers ask us, where do you start your process of making a decision? Do you start by deciding on a tool and then finding a niche based on the tool you're working with? Or do you start by choosing a niche and then figuring out which tool serves that niche best? So those are 2 angles of attack for the same problem. And to sort of break that down and explore that a little bit, you can start from either direction. You can begin by deciding which of these 2 platforms you want to work with, which one you love to work with. And then once you make that decision, You can hone in on your niche by determining which types of prospective clients will fit well in your chosen tool based on their needs, based on their industry, their model. Which kinds of clients does that tool serve really, really effectively?
Alternatively, you can begin with your chosen niche in mind, and then you can determine which of the platforms you're going to align with in order to solve the needs of that niche in a particular. So, kind of like going the other way, and then the platform becomes a decision that's secondary to after having figured out the niche.
The important thing being that you're arriving at the same place, whichever direction you start from.
Okay, so now that you're a little bit more primed to understanding how to choose between one or the other platform, we've put together a little exercise, and the idea is we're just going to walk through just examples of some hypothetical client stores, and then in the comments, you all can just leave us your answers to which of the platforms you would choose for each of these. So we'll just walk through them now, and you can just leave your comments, and we'll have a nice discussion about it afterwards.
So the first hypothetical client store is an eyewear brand, small manufacturer of high-end vision glasses and sunglasses from Toronto, Canada, like me. They have a direct-to-consumer sales model, and they need some specific things like loyalty points program and gift cards.
Awesome. The second one would be a graphic artist print on demand, or POD apparel brand, an independent illustrator from Brisbane, Australia, that has no interest in looking after production, but they're very particular about customized design, so visuals, interactions, and things like that.
Our next one is a multi-brand fashion retailer from Paris, France. They're a mid-sized company. They've got a large e-commerce catalog. They've got a fair amount of collections and filtering needs. And aside from their e-commerce activities, they also have 4 physical store locations that they need to sync inventory with.
Yeah. Then next up, we have a Notion template store. So it's a digital products store built by a small team of system builders from São Paulo, Brazil, just like me. And it's an extensive library of different templates for sale, backed by a comprehensive blog that acts as a content marketing machine. So which one would you choose for that?
We look forward to seeing all of your answers in the comment section below. Aside from your answers, we'd love to hear why you've picked the platforms that you've picked for each one.
Yeah, let us know. Okay, cool. So we're going to also leave in the description down below a few nice examples of websites built both in Webflow E-Commerce and Shopify, just so that you can take a look, play around with them, and see the differences between them.
So what's the verdict here? Which tool should you choose? Well, it's not so black and white. It's not so cut and dry. I know that some of you may have been expecting for an answer at the end of this video, but it's not like that. As you see from all the things that we've talked about today, it really depends. It depends on the use case. It depends on what niche you're working in. It depends on what you like to build in. It depends on what your clients are asking for. There are a lot of variables here, and depending on each one of those variables, you may pick one platform for one project and a different platform for a different project, or you may align yourself with one platform and just run with it. So I think that kind of just about covers it, doesn't it, Fernando? Hopefully this video has helped to make your journey into the world of e-commerce a little bit more informed, a little bit more accessible, and maybe perhaps a little less intimidating. These 2 e-commerce platforms, as you've learned today, are super powerful, and they're really, really robust. They enable us to have great careers in the world of web design development and e-commerce specifically. And who knows, you might just fall in love with both of these platforms like we have.
All right, so now that you know a little bit more about these platforms, we're actually going to dive a bit deeper on the next video, and I'm going to be walking you through a build of a complete e-commerce website on one of these platforms. So can you guess which one it's going to be? Leave your guesses in the comments down below, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much, Dave. I'll see you on the next one too.
Thanks, Fernando. Thanks everyone for watching. And if you enjoyed this video and found it informative, then please give the video a like and make sure also to hit the subscribe button. Take care. See you soon.
All right. See you soon. Bye-bye.